Hello, friends. This is Confessions with Amy, and I'm glad you're visiting my channel. Here we share new confessions every day.
I never felt like I was part of their family. It wasn't the first time Tom had brought me to their house in Naperville. Not in the second one. And certainly not on the night they decided to have a family dinner to make things better. It was the initiative of his mother, Jane. A stern woman with well-groomed hands, a voice like a blade, and a smile that she turned on only for the sake of guests or cameras. She didn't approve of me from the start. Too direct, too independent, as she'd once told Tom, loudly, but ostensibly in a whisper. That night, everything seemed staged. A large mahogany desk, as if from Pinterest. Napkins folded in the form of swans. Wine for $70, although they usually didn't drink anything more expensive than a supermarket Pinot. Jane was standing by the stove in a queen of the kitchen apron, pretending to be happy to see me. But Frank, her husband, was different. He was always overly friendly. The type of man who looks at you longer than necessary. Who jokes so that Tom doesn't hear. He says compliments that he disguises as caring. "Are you wearing that dress again, Jen?" It perfectly accentuates. He paused, glanced back at Jane the figure. I just smiled, like I always do. Courteous, but not really. A moment later, Tom was distracted by the conversation with his brother. I was alone in the kitchen, and of course Frank was right there with me. "You know what I've been meaning to offer you for a long time?" he said as he took out a bottle of some amber liquor from the cabinet. "Your own signature cocktail. This is my recipe. Special guests only." He poured the drink into a tall glass, added some juice, ice, and shook it. He gave it to me with a smile that was too big. "You'll love it, I promise. Very soft. You can hardly feel how it works." I looked down at my glass. The drink was a dull golden color, slightly foaming around the edge. It smelled too sweet. Too easy, like a trick syrup. I took it. But she didn't take a sip. From that moment on, something switched in me. I already knew I wouldn't drink it. I wasn't paranoid. I was a woman who learned to trust myself, especially when my gut started to speak up. And now she was screaming. I went back to the dining room. They all sat there, waiting for Jane to bring in the main course. There were glasses in front of each of them, white wine, some water. Jane has a similar tall glass, with the cocktail she poured herself earlier. I looked around. Frank didn't look at me. He was already showing off his vintage watch to some nephew. I went to the table. I changed the glasses. Quietly. Quickly. Without pathos. I just put mine where hers was. And hers to where mine was. I didn't do it because I wanted revenge. I did it to find out. Until the end. No doubt about it. And so that when I make a decision, I know that I wasn't wrong. I sat down at the table. And waited. When you live in anxiety for a long time, it teaches you to be very attentive to small things. The way someone puts down a glass. The way someone looks at you, thinking you don't notice. The way a second's delay in someone's reaction says more than any words. I sat next to Tom, looking at a plate of perfectly laid salmon, and pretended to listen to the conversation. Jane returned to the table with the last course and put on another show. She told me what kind of marinade she used, that she smoked fish in some new eco-smoke box that was given to her for her anniversary. "Jennifer, you'll like it," she said with mock concern. "It's a delicately flavored dish. For thin people." I said, "Thank you," but my voice was drier than I'd intended. I was a little tired of how they presented everything with a joke, with the message "be grateful that you are sitting here at all." Although I knew perfectly well who was running the house with Tom, who was pulling the job, and who, in this marriage, had long since grown out of the need to prove something to someone. Frank raised his glass, my glass, the one that was now in front of Jane. "To the family," he said, looking at me a little too long. Reluctantly, Jane raised her glass, too. I took a sip. I didn't move. No more than 2 minutes had passed. They were talking about some trip to Arizona where they were going for the winter. I answered politely, briefly. She noted how Frank was once again focusing on the heat, the pool, and how it's great to be alone. And then I saw Jane's hand slowly drop away from the glass, her fingers suddenly clenching weakly in the air, as if they'd lost their coordination. She blinked too long. She blinked again. She reached for the water. "Something," she mumbled without finishing the sentence. "Everything okay, Mom?" Tom asked. I was looking right at her. With her perfectly parted hair. With the pearl drop earrings I'd once given her and which she'd said she'd keep for later. She was wearing them for the first time today. Now she was sitting with her elbow on the edge of the table, as if she'd lost her balance. Frank stiffened. He stood up quickly, half jokingly. "Maybe you're just hungry, Jane." But there was no humor in his voice. He looked at her with real fear. Not panic, the fear that men give out when they don't know what to do. When they are no longer in control. She tried to stand up. The chair creaked. Tom caught her elbow. Her niece, who was sitting next to her, leaned forward in alarm. "It's okay," Jane tried to say, but the words came out quieter than usual. And slower. I stood up. Gradually. "No fuss." Frank glanced at me. "Fast. Evaluator." It was at that moment that he understood. I saw something tighten in his face. He wanted to say something, but he didn't. Because I couldn't. Because now he didn't know that I knew. Or that she might know. I looked at him. Calmly. Not with a threat. Just with understanding. I didn't say a word. I went to the coat rack and put on my coat. Tom glanced back, but was preoccupied with his mother. "Jen, where are you going?" "Home," I said simply. "I want fresh air." He was going to follow me. But Jane coughed. And he stayed. I went out into the night, into the light October wind. I got in the car. She closed the door. She allowed herself to exhale for the first time all evening. I didn't take revenge on anyone. I just decided I wasn't going to eat what they gave me. I don't like stories in which a woman guessed and everything turned out to be true, because she had intuition. It's like some magical sixth sense. In fact, everything is much more prosaic. You're just noticing. You remember. You compare them. You don't anticipate, you observe. Sometimes for years. I knew Frank wasn't the type to talk straight. It envelopes. Smiling. Compliments your dress, not you. "You look good for a mother of two," he once told me, knowing I had no children. When I didn't respond, he added, "Well, you know, that was a compliment." When Tom was away on business trips, Frank called. He asked me how I was, and offered to stop by with tools, although nothing broke. Once or twice I'd heard him tell Jane that "Jen's a little tense, you need to go easy on her." And I also knew one thing, Jane hated it when someone drew attention to themselves, especially women around her husband. Even her own son is in the background. She was always in charge. Frank was her stage name. She is a director, he is a contented actor who played the role of a caring husband. So I always kept my distance. Not out of fear. Because I knew that any wrong move and they'd throw me out without explanation, and Tom would be in an awkward position between loyalty and logic. And to be honest, he would have chosen the former. That's why I never gave Frank a reason. I never spoke ill of him. I never argued with Jane. I was playing a game. I played it carefully. Until that night. Before he came up to me with a glass. Before his fingers lingered on the glass a little longer than was appropriate. The way he said "just for you" with an unmistakable undertone. Before I remembered everything I'd endured for the last 4 years. How I was made to feel like I should be grateful for their approval. For letting Tom marry a woman like me, independent, with a career, with an opinion. And then I knew they weren't going to stop. Not Frank. And not Jane, who closed her eyes or, worse, pretended that nothing was happening. That's why I changed the glasses. Not because I wanted to hurt her. Because I wanted to know if I was imagining everything, or if I was living among people who were used to getting away with it. If nothing had happened, I would have put it out of my mind. But what happened next, it confirmed everything I felt. And even more. I didn't go home right away. I just drove through the streets of the suburbs, without a route. The Chicago streetlights flashed across the windshield like a countdown: 1, 2, 3. Leaves from the trees fell on the road in yellow and purple spots, as if someone was deliberately trying to create the perfect scene for the finale, which I myself could not fully imagine. My heart was beating steadily. Don't panic. Without guilt. I knew I'd done the right thing. But I didn't know what would happen next. And there was something oddly comforting about it. About 40 minutes later, I heard the phone ring. I didn't answer the phone. He called a second time. Then a third. I turned off the sound. I stopped at a small park, the one where we used to go for walks together with coffee takeaways and daydreams about the future. About your home. About the children we couldn't get together. I was sitting on a bench with a view of the pond, wearing a coat that was more suitable for early spring than for the cooling October. But the cold didn't bother me. I got home around 9 in the evening. I knew Tom would be there by now, and he was actually sitting on the edge of the couch, his shirt unbuttoned, his face full of tension that he didn't know how to hide. "Can you explain what it was?" he began without greeting. "Can you tell what she drank?" I answered calmly. He hadn't expected this. I don't know. We thought maybe she just got sick. She's 60 now. No, Tom. Your mother is in great shape. She was the most cheerful person at the table until she took a sip from the glass your father had prepared. The glass that was meant for me. He paused. I could see him struggling with himself. He wanted to say, "Are you crazy?" But something inside him held the words back. "You think he drugged you?" I looked at him in silence. It wasn't a question. It was a test. He knew the answer. He just wanted to hear me say it out loud so I could challenge him later. To say that I was exaggerating, that it's impossible, that Frank would never. "Tom," I said slowly, "in these 4 years, you haven't once asked me why I try not to be alone with him. Not once. You just took his side tacitly. Comfortable. I didn't know you were uncomfortable." I chuckled. Not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. You didn't want to know. And these are different things. He lowered his eyes. I saw his marriage deflate, gently, quietly, like a balloon that is slowly being blown out. Without Cotton. No tragedy. Everything just became visible. "She'll be fine," he added. "The hospital said that it seems to be just a short-term reaction to alcohol. You really think he might have?" I stood up. "I'm not going to convince anyone. I know what I did. I didn't put anything in it. I just didn't drink what someone I don't trust gave me. And if the result was that you started asking questions for the first time in years, then it wasn't for nothing. Now what? Now you decide for yourself. I will not fight. I won't explain myself. But I'm not silent anymore either." He remained seated. I went into the bedroom and closed the door behind me. I didn't know if he would stay with me, but I knew I wouldn't be the same person again. 3 weeks have passed. No one called me. Not Jane, not Frank. Even through volumes. They knew I understood. And I knew they understood that, too. Sometimes victory is not when people are afraid of you, but when they stop pretending. When everything superfluous is reset, and everyone is no longer pretending. We're strangers now. But to be honest, we were never really a family. We were a construct that I tried to maintain for Tom's sake, for the sake of politeness, for the sake of peace in the house. But behind this world for years, there was dirt that everyone turned a blind eye to. And as soon as I stopped being comfortable, this design began to crumble on its own. I didn't tell anyone about that night. Not to my friend, not to my colleague, not even to the psychologist I sometimes went to last year. Because it's not a gossip story. This is not a "you won't believe what he did" story. This is my story. The story of how one day I decided that you can't do this to me. Not anymore. Tom stayed. But a lot of things have changed in us. He became quieter. He looked at me with a new intensity, sometimes guilty, sometimes cautious. I didn't rush him to conclusions. Everyone is responsible for what they didn't notice. Or didn't want to notice. We lived under the same roof, but for the first time I felt like I had a voice in this house. A month later, we were having dinner together, just at home, and he suddenly said, "I talked to my father." I asked directly. I didn't answer. I just waited. He didn't admit anything. But he was afraid. I saw it. I nodded. "Do you think he won't try again?" I looked at him calmly. I think he realized I wasn't the same person I was a year ago. Neither you, nor he, nor your mother can play the old game with me anymore. He nodded. There was respect in his eyes. Maybe for the first time in real life. Sometimes people think that revenge is a cry, it's tears, it's the police, trials, scandals. But no. Revenge is when you refuse to play by someone else's rules. When you draw a line, not a bright one, but an insurmountable one. I didn't tell anyone what happened. No one knows I changed the glasses. But when I look in the mirror, I don't look away anymore. And this is my victory.